Hi everyone, this is Tom from NoCode Shorts, where I interview no-code people from all over the world. And today with me is Matt from Restack Labs. Matt, please introduce yourself.
Hey, my name is Matt Krandel. I'm the founder and CEO of Restack Labs, a software development agency building all sorts of really cool software using AI, low-code, and no-code solutions like Bubble and WeWeb. We have been in business for a little over 5 years, and kind of similar to others in the no-code space, initially found no-code out of a need to get a product built, and didn't know how to code, didn't know how to build really anything technical, and came from a completely non-technical background, and ended up discovering some tools, initially Webflow, and then shortly after that Bubble, and have been building full-time with these tools since. Recently, we at Restack Labs started side of the agency where we're incubating our own products. And we recently launched our first two products. One is called KitBoard and the other is called Wordsmith. And they're both essentially full stack applications that sit on top of the ConvertKit ecosystem. So how KitBoard works is you initially sign up, you would authenticate your KitBoard account with your ConvertKit account by signing in with OAuth in step one. And then you would name your board right here. And the way that it works is KitBoard pulls in all your tags from ConvertKit. And tags are essentially a way to segment your audience in ConvertKit. And each tag represents a column in your KitBoard board. And the data is basically synced one-to-one directly from ConvertKit to KitBoard. So it's really easy to use, and people that already have their tagging system already set up in ConvertKit can easily pull in their data and get set up in KitBoard to create a board. So you select your tags.
They don't need to change anything, any tags. They just import the tags from the ConvertKit and use them here in the app, right?
It's exactly right. We'd suggest that you kind of create a new tagging schema, but that's more of an advanced feature. So you click next, and you can also pull in your custom fields and your custom field data that is stored in ConvertKit. That's essentially fields that you can add so that you can store specific data about each subscriber in your list. And then you can pull in your subscribers from ConvertKit. And what's so cool about this is we actually don't store any subscriber data directly in our database. Instead, we rely on an API call directly from ConvertKit using ConvertKit's API. And the benefit to
this was my next question, right? You can have a lot of subscribers. So how do you deal it when importing? So you are not importing it. Mm-hmm.
That's sort of the magic of this, right? Currently, if you want to use a CRM with your ConvertKit data, you need to worry about two-way syncing and making sure that data in your CRM is up to date with data in your ConvertKit account. And ultimately, it doesn't allow you to have one single source of truth, which is super important. And so we get around that by not saving any of that core data directly in our platform. Instead, we leverage ConvertKit's new version 4 API, which is super fast, well documented, and really powerful.
That's
so
smart.
That you can easily, thank you. So you can easily kind of get set up, and yet all your data is still in ConvertKit. So it really almost functions more as a skin on top of your ConvertKit database than anything else. So you click view your board, and this is a board that I already have set up. And so, a lot of things that you can do here, but I think at its most basic, is you can drag subscribers from one column to the next. And what it does is on the back end, it removes one tag in ConvertKit and applies the other tag. And so all of the tagging administration and back and forth is kind of done for you within KitBoard. So you don't have to worry about going into the ConvertKit backend and updating things. Another really interesting piece that frankly is functionality that's missing from ConvertKit is, let's just go down to, we can click on a subscriber and you get into your subscriber view. So you can do a bunch of things here. The first is you can update your custom field data. So as we update this data, again, we're hitting the API and you're saving data you're updating this data, this custom field data directly in the ConvertKit database. You can obviously change statuses right here, which does the same thing effectively as dragging a subscriber from one column to the next. And then we added a bunch of functionality that sits on top of ConvertKit, but that we do store in our database because the functionality and sort of the API features weren't available for us to do this, all within ConvertKit. And one of those is long form notes. And so we can go in here and add a really long form note with rich text, with images, with markdown formatting. And we can save this directly on the subscriber, but this is something that we're housing in our database. And so it really allows people to use their ConvertKit data as more of a traditional CRM and take notes about different meetings that they're having with their audience.
Super useful. So in this case, the ConvertKit just stays as a mailing platform and you are managing all your contacts and relations here in KitBoard, right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Another highly requested feature is the ability for reminders. And so essentially, same thing as notes, but what we're doing here is we enable users to create reminders about each specific subscriber. And you can customize whatever you want to be reminded about, the task that you have for that subscriber, set a date, and we'll email you at that predetermined time with that reminder with a link back into KitBoard so that you can follow up and take further action, whether it's sending another email to that subscriber, calling them, reviewing something, or any other task. So we also have activities. And so this essentially enables you to track activity about your subscriber, when they were added to a board, when they were sort of moved from one group to another, notes, reminders, like sort of just a history of that subscriber. And we're actually working right now on team accounts, and so something like activity will be increasingly important as you have more than one team member in a KitBoard account. You'll be able to see who wrote notes, who had reminders or changed the status of a subscriber on your team. Something that's really cool as well is we have a Gmail integration set up. And so you can actually connect your Gmail to your account, and you can see all of the email in your Gmail with that subscriber. And so if you think about like a one-to-one sales process for a high ticket item, odds are you're going to be going back and forth on email with that subscriber, answering questions and talking to them about the offer, et cetera. And so the ability to just quickly in KitBoard see all of that email back and forth in one place, and then one click to open up Gmail and respond to that email, I think is really powerful and saves users a lot of time. And then I think the last thing that's really important is we have this view in Kit, which is ConvertKit button. And so if we click that, it's essentially a link out to the subscriber view of that subscriber in ConvertKit. And the reason why that's super powerful is there's a whole host of things that don't have API functionality yet. And so like viewing your sequences and your automations and forms and purchases and all the other features in ConvertKit that aren't available by API yet. So we think it's important to give ConvertKit power users a way to easily get back into this. And so that's sort of the core of what KitBoard is today.
Yeah, that's super cool. And another bubble app which looks really, really beautiful. Did you use any kind of a design system, or how was the design process? Let's start with the design process of this app. How it was built.
So we worked really hard at first on the functionality and on the user experience to really get that right. And then once we felt like we had the functionality down and we had, a good idea of all the features that we wanted and tested everything and everything was working great on that end, we actually partnered with an incredibly talented designer named Rafal to kind of refine the overall look and feel of the app, and just thrilled with the outcome of how things turned out. He's an incredible designer.
Yeah, people often expect that, the Bubble app will just look beautiful from scratch, but this is not true. When you have a really good designer, the app can look like this and have this, slide experience for the users. So yeah, let's jump into the editor and show us how it was built, because this is also interesting. Some of the people can doubt if it really can be built with Bubble. Yes, so this is the proof. We are in the editor, and this is this app.
I think that's one of the most interesting pieces about this is like when you're using this, even if you're technical and understand development, at no point in time does this feel like it looks or behaves like it was built in Bubble. And when we tell users that and tell people that, they're pretty amazed. And so yeah, definitely proud of that fact of that. This doesn't look like a Bubble app, which
so what
maybe
was
doesn't speak so positively. Maybe doesn't that,
what was
maybe
the
that doesn't speak so
the hardest part of building? What was the hardest part of building this app? I mean, the APIs, integrations, the interface, or what part of the hardest to build?
So I think in this particular case, sort of really understanding how best to work with external data. We've built probably 50 different applications over the past several years, and by far the majority of them deal with and leverage first-party data, meaning you're saving the data to the Bubble database. And I mean, it's so powerful, and it's one of the most important things because you can more natively use a lot of the features in terms of workflows and some of the other functionality built into Bubble. But I think integrating the primary data in the app, which is subscriber lists and data about the subscribers and dealing with JSON, and sort of having that work well and effectively within the confines of Bubble was sort of the biggest challenge. And again, the way that we do that is by relying on the API connector, relying on many different calls set up on the page, different action steps and different API calls use this data, and really just getting super comfortable with how to do that. So there's a lot of APIs.
The majority of app is API connecting with the ConvertKit and doing actions between ConvertKit and Bubble. And of course, you've built all the APIs on yourself, not relying on some kind of a plugins, right?
For what it's worth, I'm very anti-plugins. I guess unless we build them, I think it's really important to be able to see, exactly what's going on and understanding, different calls. And I think when you're relying on third-party plugins, that process is obfuscated. And, not to mention that, ultimately you don't control your own destiny as much when there's a change in how a plugin behaves and in the underlying code. I just think it's really important to actually write your own API calls, especially for an application that relies on especially for an application that relies on having this external data as such a central part of the platform.
Especially when the plugins are the API plugins, right? Because when they are just a simple JavaScript, it's not that crucial. But if there are external plugins, external API calls in the plugins, and you are having, as you said, the app that relies on the user data, it's better to use. I mean, you can, of course, start with some kind of a plugin to make an MVP, the proof of concept, but in the end, it's better to have your own.
Absolutely. And, I think this actually brought, out a lot of challenges, in using Bubble to build something that relies purely on external data from an editor standpoint, right? Like when you have so many different APIs and different schema and different levels to this, there are a lot of things that I'd like to see changed and improved on, Bubble on the Bubble side about the API integration process, right? Like I can't tell you how many times I've been in the property editor trying to select the right get external data and having a basic API naming convention cut off and having to guess around that. So the way that it handles importing data, structuring lists of data, JSON, a lot of room for improvement. But again, having said that, I do think that this is still one of the fastest ways to build today compared to a traditional stack.
And going back to the design and the organization of the project, do you have some kind of a system on how you build the project? I mean, naming elements, naming workflows, organizing them in Bubble, because this is a question that people often ask, how to build projects with Bubble and not get lost when the project is complicated.
So, I do think that is really important. I think it becomes more important when there's a bigger team in place and you have multiple people in the editor. Given that this was an incubator project, a project at Restack Labs that we incubated and built ourselves, there weren't too many people in the editor, and so it was a really small team. I actually did most of the development, and so this was one of those things where we kind of sacrificed organization for speed. Having said that, I do like I have my specific codes and things that where I name specific elements, group focus and pop-ups and different ways of it's less naming conventions and more just kind of ways I like to operate in Bubble around storing data in specific groups or only having states on hierarchical page level items, or not relying as much on reusable elements as some that I know. Hint, hint, Tom. But generally pretty flexible there. And then on the workflow side, really simple stuff like where there are some related or binary actions, doing some color coding, but generally speaking, nothing too crazy. Again, I think it's way more important when you have a much bigger team and a lot more eyeballs on on the editor, and it's something that we actually absolutely do for agency clients when we have a much bigger team involved here.
So from the perspective of a design and in terms of complexity of an application, it may look simple, but in terms of the integration and working with ConvertKit, it wasn't the typical project like that. You have all the data, as you mentioned, in Bubble, and you are just building a CRM in Bubble because there are number of CRMs in Bubble and templates and so on. But this is unusual, and it's solving a really important problem. And then, as you said, you are building this as a project inside your agency and with a guy from ConvertKit. Did I hear it well? Right? He's also involved.
Yeah, he owns a small piece of KitBoard, and they've been tremendously helpful, and it's been just a pleasure to work with the entire team over there. And again, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but they recently launched an app store, so any developer can go and build for ConvertKit's massive 50,000 user base of creators, and there's certainly a lot to be built for that community and for the needs of creators. And so they've been really available and super willing to help as their app store is getting off the ground. And so if you have questions about how the API is structured or if a new feature is coming, there's an entire Slack group that you can join, and super responsive over there. So it's been great.
How do you start with developing on top of this ConvertKit App Store? I mean, you have to register, you have to approve it, review, or you just connect with the API and build? What's the process? Can you tell us?
To get started, building on top of the ConvertKit ecosystem, it's really easy. You basically create a ConvertKit account, you go down to developer, and you can create a new app. It's all self-serve, and I think you do need to get approved, but they're super responsive over there, and you can get approved quite quickly. And they have access, obviously, to their API docs, and there's a community that you can join to learn more about what's possible and the functionality available on the version 4 API. And I mean, it's really easy to get started.
And they've just launched, so they are open to new apps and not many competitors, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's a super interesting ecosystem to be building on top of.
Good to know.
I think the closest thing that I think that this is like is when Shopify or WordPress kind of opened up their platform. So it's really interesting.
But can you tell us what convinced you to work with the ConvertKit ecosystem? Do you have some previous experience with that, or a contact with the people from ConvertKit? I mean, they've just launched the App Store, and how did you find about it, and how did you find an idea about how to build a CRM on top of ConvertKit?
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned before, I think distribution and finding customers for your product is one of the hardest aspects of building any project. And I was on Twitter about a year ago, and I saw a tweet from the founder of ConvertKit, Nathan, who mentioned that he had all these ideas for things that could be built on top of ConvertKit. And so I literally sent him a DM. I said, what ideas are you thinking about? I'm a developer. I'm super interested in building stuff for ConvertKit. And that led to a great relationship over the past year, kind of working with him and working with the guys over at ConvertKit. And the concept for KitBoard and for a lightweight CRM sort of initially came from Nathan. It was a need that he had himself, wanting to do one-to-one sales directly from his email list. So that was an example of something that where there was a direct need that he
all started with a DM, with a Twitter DM, right? The whole story.
It all started with a DM. And I also have a background in media. In a past life, I worked in investment banking, covering the media and technology sector. So really liked media. I really like the creator economy, and think that the future there is really strong. But there clearly need to be more tools built out for that entire space. And so this was an example of something where my background combined with some relationships and just an interest in a specific industry all came together and kind of gave birth to KitBoard.
But when you reached out to Nathan and started talking about that you can build some of his ideas, did you mention that this will be built with NoCode, with Bubble?
It's a great question. So initially, it didn't come up at all. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of people make in NoCode and in kind of Bubble generally, which is, most people, have a problem and they have a need to have that problem solved. And the exact stack, how it's solved, whether you're building a traditional app, whether you're building a NoCode app, is completely irrelevant. And so, we built this app in the first MVP in a couple of days and sent it over to him. And as a user, this didn't look anything like it does today, but solved the need. And he started using it and found a lot of value in the platform, whether it was built on Bubble or not. And obviously, further down the line, talked about Bubble, talked about some of the limitations and constraints, of which there are fewer and fewer every day. But ultimately, customers and users have issues, and they need those issues solved with software and tools. And how those tools are built, is one of the most meaningless things of all, whether it's traditional code or bubble.
That's super important for all the people to understand that the end clients and customers, they don't care about the technology underneath. It just has to work. It just has to be beautiful. And this is what you can do with Bubble, right?
The design and the way that it looks is probably 100 times more important than the stack that it's built on. I'll say that.
Okay, so at the end, can you give some advice to the people who are considering the way if to go with no code, if to go with Bubble or not? Can you say something to them?
If you are proficient in Bubble and you know Bubble really well, then use Bubble to build out your concept. If you're proficient in React and JavaScript and some more traditional frameworks, then use those. I think building software is extremely challenging, and the challenges around marketing, user acquisition, identifying problems, all of the non-technical pieces of the building software are more challenging by a long shot than actually building the software. And so I think, having seen the business side, earlier in my career, and having seen the technical and development side over the past 5 years or so, I think I've just come to appreciate just how hard the other pieces are. And so don't spend your time obsessing about the tech stack or how to build something. Focus on the challenges to software that are much harder to overcome, like finding a market, finding users, and identifying problems to solve.